Okay, so today I'll be talking about Allan Dwan's 1954 picture Silver Lode. I've discussed Allan Dwan before on this program. We've actually talked about a number of Allan Dwan's films on this program. I even constructed a playlist of maybe 4 or 5 of my videos, the films I've discussed which are directed by Allan Dwan. The reason I think Allan Dwan is a important filmmaker is because of how instructive I find his filmography. I think the way Allan Dwan put together a film was the immediate manifestation of D.W. Griffith's legacy, which is to say this old school idea of staging as we know it, insofar as traditional Hollywood filmmaking is downstream of Allan Dwan, the staging of interiors, if you will. That very theatrical approach to cinema, wherein there isn't this could be disputed within certain of Griffith's own films, but certainly within someone like Allan Dwan and early Hollywood in general, 1920s, generally the 30s, the 40s, the 50s is when things are starting to change, we could argue, and directors are getting a bit more, and costs and logistics are allowing more production ambitions to be realised. But anyway, what I was saying was, I think if you observe the films of Allan Dwan, excuse me, note the films we've discussed so far on the program: The Good Bad Man, Tide of Empire, 1939's The Gorilla, and then we've discussed his later works, and this is what I'm getting into today with Silver Lode. Obviously, Escape to Burma was the very first film we discussed on Film of the Day. Then Most Dangerous Man Alive, I had an enormous amount of praise for, and considering I got 5 likes on that video, I'm surprised that people seem to think I'm not crazy and that I am onto something when I talk about the genius of Allan Dwan's final feature there, The Good Bad Man, The Most Dangerous Man Alive. Noel Oakeshott and I once joked about if we wrote a biography of Allan Dwan, we would title it The Good Bad Man to the Most Dangerous Man Alive, the story of Allan Dwan. Anyway, the title doesn't make any sense other than incorporating 2 names of his pictures, but whatever, I digress. Watching Allan Dwan's films, you really get an understanding of what traditional film direction was. What D.W. Griffith's protege would consider competent directing. That's what we're talking about. If you can master or understand the reasons for why Allan Dwan's films are effective, why they look the way they look, why they look different from the films you or I might make if we had those scripts. I think this is the key to understanding the formative language of cinema itself as we know it. Now, moving on from that, we'll have to acknowledge that Allan Dwan, after the silent era, he seemed to be a little bit out of ideas, or at least out of a job. This was the Great Depression, after all. The 1930s saw Allan Dwan working on fairly dismal comedies, and just these banal, disposable romantic ventures. Dime a dozen. I think he was just looking for work, and he knew that he'd be hired for anything. He had enough of a legacy, I think, and I think in the 1930s, if you have to understand, the parties that Allan Dwan threw in the 1920s allegedly inspired the parties we read about in F. Scott Fitzgerald's The Great Gatsby. That's how prominent Allan Dwan was at one time, right? He was the king of Hollywood at one time. So he had work, right? He was finding work throughout the 1930s and 1940s, but nothing really sticks. Nothing we really look at from a contemporary perspective, and it really grabs us. Or at least I can only speak for myself, but I'd be very surprised if there are other people championing Allan Dwan's output throughout the 1930s and 1940s. You'd have to be delusional, in denial, disingenuous, looking for a hot take. I don't know. There's no merit to vast. The Gorilla is the best film Allan Dwan released in the 1930s. That's my hot take. I'm dead serious about that. Find me a better one. Find me a more interesting, amusing, worthwhile, entertaining, and different film Allan Dwan made in the 1930s than The Gorilla, starring the third-rate Marx brothers, known as the I can't even remember the Ritz brothers. Christ Almighty. And then Allan Dwan in the 40s. You know, World War II only got so much work. You know, the economies, Hollywood's more interested in prioritizing other things. And then in the late 1940s, and speaking of the, you know, having won the war and that becoming the new religion of the United States in a way, and of the Western world in general, they decided that they were going to allow Allan Dwan to direct, and this was a real kind of, I'm surprised they must have really wanted to be kind to Allan Dwan to allow him to direct the 1949 John Wayne World War II picture, iconic film, Cotton Hill's favourite film, Sands of Iwo Jima. Sands of Iwo Jima is not the greatest film in the world. Cotton Hill's favourite film is not going to be the greatest film in the world, I think, by any means. But I find it remarkable that Allan Dwan was allowed this picture because, well, I mean, the John Wayne World War II film was that Sands of Iwo Jima starring John Wayne, 1949. There's no way that's not going to be a huge film. So anyone could have directed it. Why give it to Dwan? Dwan's previous films do not demonstrate the sort of skills that were required to, presumably, as far as conventional wisdom would go, Allan Dwan's skills don't seem like the glove to fit Sands of Iwo Jima's script. That's a terrible phrase, but we'll just keep going. I'm not going to edit over that because I'm not a pussy. I care what I think of me. I don't care what other people think of me. You know, no, fuck them. And so with Allan Dwan, he's allowed to direct Sands from Iwo Jima. It must have been just like you know, Dwan, you've been around for a long enough time. You can earn the profits of this film. Go for it, man. And that's interesting to me because I have to say the film could have possibly been at least interesting technically if someone other than Dwan directed it, ironically enough. Well, by someone other than Dwan, I mean, you know, the John Fords and Michael Curtises and King Vidors of the world, if you will. More technical and consistent and brave filmmakers. Well, that's a bit unfair. Allan Dwan probably could just consider himself a carpenter of sorts, a tradesperson. And then Allan Dwan, after this, he's given work. He's working on some pretty, relatively, I guess you could say they were B pictures, but you know, they were westerns. They reached relatively wide audiences. They starred people like Barbara Stanwyck and Ronald Reagan. You know, they got out there. People saw them. He was mailing a lot more money, presumably, at this time than in the 1930s and then in the 1940s. And in my opinion, the true Allan Dwan revival is not Sands of Iwo Jima. It's the brilliance, and it is tied in, at least partially, with Allan Dwan's skill as a director, as well as John Alton's skill as a cinematographer, and the brilliant, considered swan song that this film's screenplay is, courtesy of the apparently very intelligent screenwriter Karen DeWolf. Silver Lode gave Allan Dwan the confidence he needed to subsequently helm brilliant films, possibly even more brilliant films, I would say, like Escape to Burma, and obviously The Most Dangerous Man Alive. As there's also a couple other films. Slightly Scarlet might be better than Silver Lode. I'd have to watch it again. Enchanted Island, there's another one. There's another fucking brilliant Dwan film from later on. Enchanted Island, and you're gonna hear me clicking to find out what it is because I hate you. The River's Edge. There you go. I forgot about that. What it was called. That didn't take long. And so here I am, making a video on and praising Excuse me, goodness, drinking too much Solo. 1954 Silver Lode. I'd like to share now some elaborated upon dot points which I wrote down whilst viewing Silver Lode. I'm going to share those with you one at a time. You'll hear some clicking noises. Yes. Hear that? I'm going to make some clicking noise for you. You hear that? Yeah, it's noisy, doesn't it? This should be more professional. Yeah, it should. Fuck you. Anyway. This is a more deliberated attack on McCarthyism than High Noon, in my opinion. It's also a more consistent one. High Noon's great. I love Fred Zinnemann. I love that film. I can't remember who the film's composed. Maybe I didn't love them that much, because I was going to say I love the film's composer, but I actually don't remember their name. So I can only love them claim to love them so much, right? Can't even recall their name. But yeah, see, my thing with High Noon, my one issue of High Noon was at the end there, it becomes a matter of oh, Grace Kelly, it's like an attack on her. Like, she betrays her values to defend him, and it goes to say, it tries to lump in Quakerism with like kind of conformist cowardice of the American people. It's like trying to equate Quaker conscientious object to non-violence to that. I always thought that was a bit weird. I always had a theory that High Noon was anti-McCarthy, but pro-Korea/Vietnam, vaguely. I think I've got a text from Noel Oakeshott. I was thinking where to film some stuff at your apartment, then... Let me just open the full text. Then go to Crag to get started on the main editing of this project. Beauty. It's a unintended cameo from my good friend Noel Oakeshott / and Dode. Anyway, what's the next point we've got here? Oh yes, here's a great quote from this film which I wrote down. The protagonist is being prosecuted by a man called McCarthy. And I actually think that's genius. You might be like, oh, that's too obvious. And it's like, nah, fuck that. That takes balls in 1954. That takes fucking balls. And yeah, like, who cares if it's obvious? Call Joseph McCarthy out. Fuck that fat fuck. I'm glad he's dead. Anyway, you kill one man, it's not so hard to kill a second. The third one's easy. That's, our protagonist, whose name is... I just claim to love this film. I don't even remember the name of the protagonist. You say it all the time. Dan Ballard. Dan Ballard, portrayed by John Payne. He says to his mate who wants to enact some vigilante justice, essentially, on the apparent U.S. Marshal Fred McCarthy. That is Mitch Evans, I believe, is the it's the brother of his fiancée Rose is says, just tell me when, Dan, I'll kill him. And Dan's like, nah, man, look, that's not cool. I have to say, McCarthy is the most unlikable, despicable character in American Westerns. Possibly until Clint Eastwood really went out of his way to create the most fucking hateable character in 1992's Unforgiven, when Gene Hackman portrayed Little Bill. But yeah, until then, McCarthy is just the biggest scumbag I've ever encountered in an American Western. Holy hell. I need to learn how to pronounce this actor's name properly, because I'll be embarrassed, and also I think he deserves better than to have me mispronounce his name. So, great praise to Mr. Dan Duryea. There we go. Terrific performance, one of the most unlikable characters in the history of film. He's literally the Iago of the classic American Western. What's beautiful about this film, I hinted at it before, this film does not endorse vigilante justice. It is explicitly against it. Another great quote from this film was when the judge insists, when, the town... McCarthy claims to be a US Marshal and he's there to arrest Dan Ballard, but Dan Ballard believes that McCarthy's lying. Even though he's got the papers to prove it, McCarthy still somehow feels that he's lying, and that McCarthy's just trying to enact his own personal vengeance against Ballard and get away with it. And the town is initially very much in the vein of, come on, let's kill this supposed US Marshal. Who's gonna find out? And Ballard's, no, he's very against it. And another great quote is when the judge of this the town judge insists to another character, no, mob violence is the death of any town. Which is true. What's the point of having a town and a civilization if we're just going to resort to mob violence? It really fucking aggravates me when I hear anyone like, oh, you know, like mob violence. Sometimes it's what's needed because we need to own the libs or whatever the fuck these fucking people think. It's an absolute fucking lunacy, like fucking electroshock therapy justifying lunacy. That these like, that's a joke. I don't actually, electroshock therapy is bullshit. I'll cut that out. Actually, no, I won't. I don't care. But yeah, a film that's explicitly against vigilante justice, explicitly against the evils and the kind of, you know, witch hunt, un-American, anti-freedom of speech, anti-freedom of association, McCarthyist practices. I just need to I just need to insist this because I think sometimes this film gets a bad rap. And so does criticism of Joseph McCarthy these days. It does. People might dismiss Silver Lode. Oh, it's just an obvious allegory for McCarthy. And I'll reiterate it. Good. Fuck McCarthy. Oh, but communists, bro. We got to stop the communists. I love how when neo-Nazis in fucking South Dakota are concerned, it's like, oh, you know, freedom of speech, oh, you know, oh, they want to bring down the US government, oh, you know, oh, it's freedom of speech. But when it's communism, oh, you know, the line between politics and sedition, we'll just intentionally blur that. Fuck off, pricks. Fuck off. I'm not even a communist as such. I don't hate communism. I do hate communists. Like on a person-to-person basis, I think they're cunts. But I don't hate communism. I actually think there's some... It means well. To deny it means well is disingenuous. Capitalism does not mean well. And I think that... Anyway, what am I doing now? Just on to Karen DeWolf's screenplay is brilliant. Karen DeWolf's quite brilliant actually, because this is a very considered screenplay. Give me a moment. Yeah, American screenwriter. She's credited on over 50 films, and I think, you know, a lot of the films she seems to be credited. I'm looking for her filmography now. Throughout the 30s, looks pretty disposable here. Yeah, 40s. Seems like this for the 40s. Yeah, this is kind of disposable. But then we get to this film here, 1953's Appointment in Honduras, is one of many strong Jacques Tourneur films. And perhaps this screenwriter for hire, Karen DeWolf, decided that her last film, before she retired, she died in 89, so she retired a lot earlier, it seems. And her last film, not giving a stuff about how it would hurt her career, you know, since, as I say, she was retiring. Silver Lode, fuck McCarthy, and fuck you fucking cowards for enabling him. Yeah, as I said, this movie had balls, and if you don't think so, you have no moral backbone at all. Silver Lode posits the correct thesis that most modern privileged people don't have principles. They just care about what other people think of them. I think that what grounds would there be for criticizing Silver Lode? I think that there's a grounds for criticizing Silver Lode is that it's a typical American Western. If that's the case, then there's only 15, 20 max American Westerns that are worth talking about. If that's the case, because I promise you, Silver Lode is better than 99.5% of American Westerns. I promise you. If you don't think so, you have not seen enough American Westerns. Noel Oakeshott probably thinks so. So I'll literally, I actually need to reply to him. I'm telling you. I'll say, because I didn't reply when he texted me earlier. Sounds great. Westerns. So I'll ask him about the Silver Lode thing, but it's pretty late here. I don't know. He's waiting in bed. I don't want to bother him or his wife. Yeah. So yeah, that's my a perceived critical attack that this film might receive. But again, that's the thing. People would just presumably would just make an assumption that this film is lazy and uninspired aesthetically, because they just have not seen enough westerns. This is the John Alton photography in this film is extremely good. There isn't a poorly shot John Alton film, and if we're going to argue that a John Alton film looks bland in the context of old Hollywood, I mean, we're just deciding to be disingenuous, and I don't think we ought to be disingenuous. I think people who are critical of this film are probably just insecure about their intelligence and assume a smarter person would criticize it, and so therefore they feel, well, I ought to feel obligated to criticize this film because I assume like a smart critic would, because that's what matters. What other people think of me, how others perceive me, that's all that matters, not what I think of me. I think you're getting an understanding of why I love Silver Lode so much, because our principles are in line. The town decides that, after a while, they become scared, like, initially it's if we immediately side with this McCarty guy, like, people will think we're just disloyal idiots who will just, like, believe anything anyone says. But then, when it becomes apparent that McCarty's not going away anytime soon and he's becoming quite the inconvenience, all the townspeople are like, Dan Ballard, he's been very good to us, It's completely illogical that he'd be accused of what he's accused of, and all the circumstances are very suspicious and, completely unintuitive that McCarty's positing is the case, but, it's like, there's that piece of paper that he's got, and there's principles, but then there's like, what if like, the other people start accusing us of, what will the government think of us, what will everyone else think of us, yeah, like, I know it's wrong, but what other people think, that's what matters most, not the truth, because the truth can be obstructed. What other people think, that's what's really real. That's what really matters. I'm a poptimist! But man, maybe I don't love Silver Lode that much. I try. You see, if I really love Silver Lode, couldn't I truly embody the principles of its protagonist, John Payne? Do you know what the extent of John Payne's retribution/sadism toward McCarty is at the end of the film? After everything he does to him, after everything everyone does to try and ruin his life because of their own disgusting, fucking, defective selfishness. When it's finally revealed that McCarty is a fraud, and he has Ballard cornered at the top of a church bell tower, and he's been firing at him, and at the bottom of the stairs are the rest of the town, and it's been realized by telegram. Actually, I'll get to that in a moment, because that's important. I will asterisk that, but we'll move on for now. Yeah, so they've got McCarty cornered. McCarty, it's up. And then, so kind of Ballard says sarcastically to McCarty, oh yeah, I guess they're waiting for you now. And then so McCarty starts shooting at Ballard, but Ballard's kind of avoiding it. There's a big church bell in between them. And this is the extent of Ballard's kind of sadism. How many bullets have you got left? 2? 3? That's the most John Payne loses his cool, and starts to enjoy the idea of revenge. That's the extent of it. I wish I could be more like him. But no, I apologize to all who are listening, but maybe I ought to care what you people think of me more, but I have these vague, dumb principles. And here's what John paints us to the town when they apologize for betraying him so ruthlessly and so selfishly and so fucking cowardly. He says, "You're sorry? A moment ago you wanted to kill me. You forced me to kill. You wouldn't believe me. A man's life can hang in the balance on a piece of paper. But you're sorry." But yes, I admire this film's screenplay. Thank you, Karen DeWolf. I am as envious of your bravery and your principles as I am of Dan Ballard's own. So yes, Karen DeWolf's screenplay for Silver Lode, it explores ideas of truth, of justice, right and wrong, bravery and cowardice, principles versus circumstances. Now, it does want to explore its themes as thoroughly as it possibly can. As much as this film is seemingly positing the idea that deception and not telling the truth, lying, I just said that, is always bad. You think that's what the film's going for. But the film realizes it's not going to deal in absolutes. This film is not a Sith. This film decides that, well, what if Rose was able to organize, Rose's Ballard's fiance, as well as this other lady, and they managed to, they basically trap the, I don't know what you'd call him, the man who's in charge of the telegrams, the wire master, I guess you'd refer to him as. And I really don't know. And he, they trap him in his office, and they make him forge a telegram stating that McCarthy's a fraud, just so that they can save Ballard. But it's a net positive. I mean, it would only be a net positive, of course, if it turned out McCarthy was lying. Now, in the film's final scene, after the affirmation, the second last scene in the film is McCarthy's death, followed by Ballard coming down the stairs, reuniting with Rose, who has this fake telegram. Only she knows it's fake, in that room, in that church there. And then Ballard has a go at everyone there, and they leave. And the final scene of the film, the other lady is still trapping the wire master, I'm just going to refer to him as that, in his office. But then they receive a legitimate telegram that a US Marshal is coming to Silver Lode looking to arrest one Fred McCarthy. And so they decide that that little temporary lie can be forgiven because it was definitely a net positive. So Karen DeWolf was thinking, okay, I don't want this film to posit this absolute belief. The film's not a Sith Lord. Karen DeWolf, I assume, is not a Sith Lord. And she felt as though, okay, I don't want this film to be some hackneyed, always told the truth. Because there is no 101%, cases where the truth, or like, not the truth so much as like lying. I say lying is always the end of the world, and it's always a bad, evil thing. You should never lie ever. And this film it's a bit challenging, actually. It puts forth a situation where I don't even know how I feel about it, but I think it's audacious. It does put forth this idea that actually, like let's be real. Like, let's be realistic. As much as we're being realistic about human nature, let's be realistic about sometimes lying can save us from the absolute wrath of human nature's ugliness. Well, ugliness / ugliest traits. Now, the film ends with this other lady whose name is... I'm just going to find out. I'm going to be clicking through and annoy everyone. Yes, this film, the other lady's name... Dolly, that's her name. But she's portrayed by Dolores Moran. And yeah, good character actually. Well performed. And they received a legitimate telegram, and then she cheers. The wire master appears that he's just going to go to the grave with that secret that he allowed a forgery to go ahead, even though it saved Dan Ballard's life. But it's for a net positive. He can't argue that, so he's going to keep that secret to his grave. And she runs out into the town cheering, holding the telegram. And then this triumphant music accompanies the end of the film. Now I should mention this. It's Louis Forbes, I think. Louis Forbes. Oh, and Howard Jackson's credited as well on this wholesome website I'm on here. Interesting. Excuse me. I don't even know how Howard Jackson is. I just noted it's not mentioned in the film's opening credits. I don't care. But this film is challenging conventional wisdom as to human goodness and ideas about truth and justice and what it means to be the consequences of being dishonest and not being honest at all times, and how this can lead to an ugly situation where, well, Ballard has to kill in order to prove his name. So I guess it shouldn't be considered, and that's just shown as it is. Ballard's not proud of it at all. He's ashamed of it. One of the things he berates the town most of is, you forced me to take a life. Not, you tried to kill me, you forced me to take a life. Wow. Amazing. And then, so the film then posits that, oh, damn, maybe sometimes we have to commit a lie in order to save lives as well. But, I don't know, because the triumphant tone that then accompanies the ending there. Then we fade, and then we have a little ending card screen. The end, à la fin. It's triumphant music, and I don't know how I feel about that, because was that really how Karen DeWolf wanted it? Is that how it came across in Karen DeWolf's original screenplay? I don't know. Maybe I'll have to dig it up and have a look. I don't know if it's available online. I wonder if the studio changed the inserted the music in there in order to, I don't know if they were deliberately changing the tone of the scene or just misunderstanding it. Or maybe this was the responsibility of Dwan himself. But yeah, I don't know how I feel about that. If I have one gripe with this film, it's that, sorry about that noise there, I didn't think about that. Yeah, I'm concerned that that's my only thing resembling a gripe with Silver Lode. I guess you could gripe with it it's not the good, the bad, the ugly, it's not the Searchers, it's not Stagecoach, it's not blah 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 blah. It's better than 99.9% of American Westerns ever made. If you're one of these people who's seen 40 Westerns, you watch Silver Lode and you think maybe they're all relatively acclaimed because that's why you saw them. The only Westerns you're going to watch are the acclaimed ones, I promise you that. Seriously, do you know how many Westerns are made in the United States between 1939 and 1969? I mean, can you even comprehend that? Anyway, but yeah, so the Westerns that you find in these canon lists, they're no joke. They're the best of the bunch, typically. Which is to say, I don't think there's many... it's not like those have been heralded as opposed to the underrated classics, if you will. No, those Westerns are as good as it gets. So if you see Silver Lode on one of these lists, it's because it is one of the best. And if you don't think so, it's just because you've seen 40 Westerns, you thought maybe 15 of them at most are any good, and you think the rest are only praised because, I don't know, people praised them at the time and people still feel obligated to praise them, or because people were just, evil back then, or whatever the hell you think. They were, but two things can be true at once. A film can be made by and for evil people and still be an interesting, worthwhile film, in my opinion. And not that Silver Lode is, but we know the tenor of a lot of westerns, right? Yeah, not exactly the finest moment of Western morality, let's say. I mean, it ain't exactly Thomas More, But I know Thomas More persecuted Protestants and shit. The idealized Thomas More from the Rubber Bolt script, But yeah, if you Armand White, who I have mixed feelings about, but he's a huge Brian De Palma fan, so he clearly knows what he's talking about to some extent. Armand White once said about 2000's Mission to Mars, alleged film fans and critics who don't like Mission to Mars cannot claim to understand films, let alone like them. Now, I don't know if I agree with that in regard to Mission to Mars, but I do love Mission to Mars and a vast majority of what Brian De Palma has directed throughout his career. But now, in regard to Silver Lode, I would apply that to Silver Lode partially. I think people who don't like Silver Lode cannot claim to understand films. I don't think I would go so far as to say that they cannot claim that they like films. I'm sure they like films, just, crappier films.